On a cold night in the village of Lulaza, a young girl named Mbali lay asleep in her dark room, shared with her brother. "Don't play with that." "Oh, sorry baby, don't cry anymore," she murmured as she made to bend down to carry a crying baby. Mbali woke up from her sleep, looking around for a few seconds before realizing she had just had that same dream she often had almost every night. She sat up on her bed, took a large wrapper close to her, folded it into a makeshift baby, and started to rock it in her arms like a real baby. Mbali was the only child of her parents, and ever since she was a little girl, she had always had a special love for babies. Whenever she went out with her mother and saw any baby, she would quickly run to carry them. Surprisingly, if the child had been crying, once Mbali held them, they would stop crying and start giggling towards her. Mothers were pleased with this and would gladly give their babies to Mbali whenever she came to them. Her mother, Nandi, was surprised by this part of her daughter and felt sorry for not being able to give her another sibling. When Mbali started having these recurring dreams, she was confused and asked her mother what they meant. Nandi explained that it was likely due to her natural affection for babies that made her dream about them. "Whatever you think about the most during the day is most likely what you would dream about at night," Nandi would tell Mbali. And so Mbali did not think much of it. She enjoyed the dreams anyway and looked forward to when she would find herself babysitting several children in her sleep. As a child, Mbali did not fancy playing with sand or other childish things with her mates. Whenever she went out to play with them, she would naturally act as the coordinator, organizing her friends into structured activities. This earned her the nickname Mama among them, which meant grandmother. Mbali grew up into a beautiful young lady, and her love for children was visible for everyone to see. Mothers often told their sons to marry Mbali because she would make a good mother to their children. Such women were usually a source of blessings and favors to their husbands. Many men were interested in Mbali and would come to propose marriage to her, but she turned them all down. Her excuse was that her spirit did not seem to accept those men, and she would wait for the one her spirit accepted. It came as a surprise to everyone when Sephew, an orphan boy, came to seek her hand in marriage, and she accepted him. Sephew was the only child of his parents and struggled to make ends meet after their death. Everyone in the village knew things were really hard for Sephew, and so it shocked them when Mbali refused a lot of rich suitors only to accept him. Nandi had no option but to respect her daughter's choice and gave her support. Sephew struggled to come up with the bride price and the items on the list that Mbali's uncles gave to him. Mbali did not mind at all. Her spirit accepted Sephew and was at rest with him. The first few months of their marriage were quite difficult as they barely had enough to survive on. Sephew inherited a small farm, and that was what they cultivated to feed themselves. But in spite of the difficulty, Mbali never frustrated Sephew. She was content with their life. Sephew was a kind, patient, and humble man, and he understood her perfectly. One fateful night, Mbali and Sephew were both deep asleep when Mbali suddenly started to have those regular dreams again. But this time, it was different. In the dream, she found herself in a very big house, but surprisingly, she was alone. Then, suddenly, she started to hear the voices of little children crying, but she could not see them. She traced their voices to one of the rooms in the house and saw the children crying, extending their hands and crying out for help. Mbali's heart broke, and she tried to reach out to them to comfort them, but shockingly, she could not get close to them. She tried all she could, but it was not possible. Slowly, the children's voices started to fade, and when Mbali blinked her eyes and opened them, she could not see any of the children again. She was seized with fear, and as she tried to shout to call them back, she shouted out in reality. Sephew, who was sleeping next to her, heard her scream and tapped her. "Mbali, what is it? Why are you shouting in your sleep?" Mbali opened her eyes and tried to remember what had just happened. She narrated it to Sephew. "This is the first time I've had my regular dreams about children since we got married, but what I don't understand is why I could not touch them like before. This has never happened before. Sephew was surprised too. She had told him about her recurring dreams, but it had never been like this. He was confused and did not know what to make of the dream, so he just assured her, "Don't worry, I'm sure there is nothing to worry about." Mbali didn't think much of it and let it go. Being an only child, Sephew longed to have his own children as soon as possible, to have his own family, and Mbali was on the same page with him, as she had always dreamed of having as many children as possible. However, 1 year had passed since they got married, but Mbali had still not been able to conceive. They were not really bothered about it and went about their lives, but another year passed, and still, there was no sign of pregnancy. Mbali was the first to perceive a problem. "Sephew, don't you find it strange that after 2 years, we still have not been able to have a child? I think we need to seek a solution in time." Sephew had also been thinking about it, and so he agreed with Mbali. They needed to seek a solution. They both went to a fertility herbalist who gave them some herbs to take. Both the husband and wife needed to treat themselves in case the issue was from either of them. They started to take the herbs with the hope that they would be effective, but another year passed, and still, there was no result. By this time, the villagers could not help but wonder what the issue could be. Some of the men who had earlier asked for Mbali's hand in marriage were already married with 1 or 2 children, and yet Mbali, the lover of children and the one whom children connected easily with, was still not able to have a child of her own. This was indeed strange, and some of these men were glad that she had rejected their proposals. Mbali's mother could no longer pretend that everything was okay, and so called Mbali to her house. "My daughter, I have tried to stay away from your marriage, but the way it is now, I can no longer pretend that everything is okay. This is your 5th year of marriage now, and yet you have no child. I understand that your husband is not pressuring you, and that is why you seem to be relaxed about this problem, but you don't need to push your luck too far. Every man wants children, especially those who are the only sons. We need to look for a solution in time before Sephew changes towards you." Mbali sat there listening to all her mother said, and she was heartbroken. If anyone had told her that she, of all people, would be unable to have children, she would never have believed it. How do you explain the dreams she usually had since childhood, and how babies would find comfort in her little arms all the time? What did she do wrong? Why must this happen to her? As she thought of this, hot tears dropped from her eyes. Nandi then asked her, "What about those dreams? Do you still have them?" Mbali answered with a sad expression on her face, "Ever since I got married, I have had those dreams only once, but it was not in the usual form where I would carry and care for them. In that dream, I could not even touch them." Nandi was shocked. "This is strange. I have not paid particular attention to those dreams of yours, but with what you just said now, I can sense a problem. Your inability to touch those children might be connected to your inability to have your own child. We need to go look for answers quickly." Nandi took Mbali to a seer, and immediately the old woman saw Mbali. She exclaimed, "Why have you abandoned your children? I cannot see anyone with you. Go and look for them before it is too late." Mbali was surprised and told the woman that she had no children yet, but the old woman insisted, "That is not true. Your children are waiting for you. You must go and find them." Mbali left the old woman's place even more confused. All efforts to ask her for clarifications only led to more confusion. But even though these words were confusing, Mbali kept them and pondered over them in her heart. That evening, she asked Sephew, "What do you think about us adopting? Considering that this is 5 years since we got married, don't you think we should think outside the box?" Immediately Sephew heard that, he spat out the water he was drinking in shock. "What did you just say? I will pretend I didn't hear you. It is enough that I'm not even blaming you for our childlessness, but what I will never tolerate is that nonsense you just spat out now. The only child I will accept and love is the one that comes from my loins, Sephew spat out and walked out on.